The alarm system screamed across the orbital defense platform, and Commander Jiwon Park ran toward the main control room. Her boots hammered against the metal floor as red lights flashed everywhere. Through the windows, she could see them, ships, thousands of alien ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel, filling the space around Terra Nova like locusts. "Give me a count," Jiwon shouted at her crew. Her heart pounded in her chest. This wasn't a drill. This wasn't a training exercise. This was real. "Ma'am, I'm reading 4,000 vessels," a young officer replied, his voice shaking. "They're not responding to any communications. They're just, moving into position." Jiwon grabbed the communication panel. "All stations, this is Defense Command. We have unknown hostiles in orbit. Power up all weapons. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill." Down on the planet's surface, in the capital city of New Seoul, Captain Minho Choi was drinking coffee when the sirens started. He dropped his cup and it shattered on the ground. Around him, people stopped walking. They looked up at the sky. Minho knew that sound. Every colonist knew that sound. It was the sound they hoped they would never hear. "Everyone get to the shelters!" Minho screamed. He pulled out his communicator. "All military personnel report to your stations immediately. We are under attack." But even as he said the words, Minho saw the first strike. A beam of light came down from the sky like the finger of an angry god. It touched the eastern district of the city. For a moment, everything turned white. Then the shockwave hit. Buildings exploded. People were thrown through the air like toys. The sound was so loud that Minho couldn't hear anything else. His ears rang with a high-pitched whine. When his vision cleared, the entire eastern district was gone. Just gone. Where 50,000 people had lived and worked, there was now a smoking crater of melted rock and metal. "No," Minho whispered. "No, no, no." More beams fell from the sky. The aliens were firing on everything. Residential areas, schools, hospitals, they weren't trying to capture the planet. They were trying to kill everyone on it. Minho ran toward the military garrison. Around him, the world was ending. Buildings collapsed. Fire raged everywhere. People screamed and ran in every direction. A mother ran past him carrying a small child. The child wasn't moving. Minho forced himself to keep running. In orbit, Jiwon's defense platform fired everything it had at the alien ships. Missiles streaked through space. Railguns sent tungsten rods flying at incredible speeds. Some of the alien ships exploded. But for every ship they destroyed, 10 more took its place. "We can't hold them," her weapons officer said. "There are too many. We hold as long as we can," Jiwon replied. "Every second we fight is another second for people to get to shelter." But she knew it wouldn't be enough. The alien ships were moving toward the planet now. They were going to land ground forces. The bombardment was just the beginning. In the underground shelters beneath New Seoul, engineer Yoonji Han worked frantically at her computer terminal. The shelter shook with each impact above. Dust fell from the ceiling. Children cried. Their parents held them tight and tried to stay calm. Yoonji's job was to maintain the shelter's communication systems. Right now, she was trying to send a message to Earth, a warning. Earth needed to know what was happening. But the alien ships were jamming all transmissions. Every time she found a frequency that worked, they blocked it within seconds. "Come on," she muttered to herself. "Come on, please work." Above ground, Captain Minho Choi had reached the garrison with 200 other soldiers. They grabbed weapons and body armor. A colonel was shouting orders, but Minho barely heard him. His mind kept seeing that crater. All those people just erased. "Captain Choi," the colonel called out. "Take your men to Sector 7. Set up defensive positions. The aliens are landing troops." Minho nodded and gathered his soldiers. They moved through the burning streets towards Sector 7. The sky was dark with smoke. More beams of light kept falling, turning whole blocks into molten glass. When they reached Sector 7, Minho saw the alien landing craft. They were massive things, covered in dark armor plating. They touched down in the central park, crushing trees and monuments beneath them. Ramps opened and the aliens came out. Minho had never seen anything like them. They were tall, maybe 7 feet, with 4 arms and bodies covered in what looked like natural armor. They carried weapons that glowed with blue energy. "Open fire!" Minho screamed. His soldiers fired their rifles. The bullets hit the aliens and some of them fell. But there were so many. For every alien that fell, 5 more took its place. And their weapons were devastating. The blue energy beams cut through concrete and steel like paper. They cut through soldiers the same way. Minho watched his men die. He watched them get vaporized by enemy fire. He watched them charge forward bravely and get torn apart. Within minutes, half his force was gone. Then more than half. Then everyone except him. A building next to Minho exploded from an orbital strike. The blast threw him backward into a collapsed structure. Debris buried him. Everything went dark. In the shelter, Yunji finally found a frequency that worked. She had maybe 30 seconds before the aliens blocked it. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. She attached every scan she had taken of the alien ships, their weapon signatures, their shield frequencies, everything that might help Earth fight back. She typed 3 words at the end of the message. They showed no mercy. Then she hit send above the planet. Commander Jiwon Park's defense platform was dying. Half her crew was dead. The other half was injured. Fire raged through multiple sections. The main reactor was failing. "Commander, we have to evacuate," someone shouted. G1 shook her head. "No, keep firing. Keep firing until there's nothing left to fire." The alien ships focused their weapons on her platform. Beam after beam struck the structure. Metal screamed and tore apart. Jiwon held onto her console as the floor tilted beneath her. She thought about her daughter. Back on Earth, she thought about all the people dying below. She thought about how this wasn't fair, wasn't right, wasn't anything close to justice. The final beam hit the reactor. There was a flash of light. 6 hours after the attack began, Terra Nova was silent. The cities were gone, turned to glass and ash. The orbital platforms were destroyed. Of 10 million colonists, perhaps a few thousand survived in deep shelters. But the aliens were hunting them with machines that could detect life signs through solid rock. Yunji's message traveled through space toward Earth. It would take 14 days to arrive. When it did, humanity would learn that they were not alone in the universe. And they would learn that the universe was far more cruel than they had ever imagined. But they would also learn something else. Something the aliens would come to regret. They would learn that humans remember, that humans grieve, and that humans, when pushed far enough, can become something terrible and unstoppable. The message raced through the void, carrying images of death and 3 simple words. Earth slept, unaware that everything was about to change. That peace was over. That the time for mercy had ended before it even began. Terra Nova burned. And with it, something else burned too. Something in the human heart that had always counseled patience and forgiveness. That fire would spread. It would consume worlds, and it all started with Yunji's message. 14 days after Terra Nova died, Yunji's message reached Earth. Admiral Hyun Kim sat in his office at Fleet Command when they brought him the transmission. He watched it once. Then he watched it again. Then a 3rd time. By the 4th viewing, he had stopped crying and started thinking. The images showed everything. Mountains of bodies in the streets. Cities melted into glass. Children's playgrounds turned into mass graves. And those 3 words at the end, they showed no mercy. Hyun called his senior officers. They watched the transmission in silence. When it ended, nobody spoke for a long time. Finally, a young lieutenant broke the silence. "Sir, what do we do?" Hyun looked at the frozen image on the screen. A little girl's shoe lying in ashes. "We do what humans have always done when someone hurts our family. We make them pay." The message went to every government on Earth. World leaders gathered in Geneva for an emergency summit. President Daeho Lee stood before the assembled representatives. His face was hard as stone. "The Galactic Council has sent us their official response," Daeho said. He held up a datapad. They say this was a regrettable incident. They say the aliens have paid a fine. They say the matter is closed. He threw the datapad to the ground. I say the matter has just begun. The vote was unanimous. Every nation on Earth agreed. They would not beg the Council for justice. They would not file complaints or wait for diplomacy. They would build an army. They would build a fleet. And they would deliver justice themselves. That same day, Ambassador Somin Kang walked into the Galactic Council chambers. Aliens from 100 different worlds watched as she approached the speaking platform. The Council Chancellor, a tall insectoid creature, nodded at her. Ambassador Kang, humanity's complaint has been reviewed. The Vralik Collective has paid appropriate restitution. We hope Earth will— I resign, Somin interrupted. The chamber fell silent. Humanity has nothing more to say to this council. We trusted you to maintain peace. You failed. We came to you for justice. You gave us paperwork. So we're done talking. She turned and walked out. Behind her, the council erupted in confusion and anger. But Somin didn't care. She had delivered humanity's message. Now others would deliver a different kind of message. Earth transformed overnight. President Daeho Lee declared a state of total mobilization. Every factory on the planet stopped making civilian goods and started making weapons. Car factories built tanks. Electronics plants made targeting computers. Toy factories manufactured components for missiles. In orbit, the asteroid belt became a shipyard. Thousands of workers moved to the construction platforms. They worked 12-hour shifts 7 days a week. Nobody complained. Everyone had seen the images from Terra Nova. Everyone wanted revenge. Chief Engineer Taeyong Seo led Project Prometheus, humanity's new weapons program. He stood in his laboratory looking at designs that would have been unthinkable a month ago. Weapons that violated every treaty humanity had signed. Weapons designed to cause maximum destruction. We're crossing a line here, his assistant said quietly. Taeyong nodded. Yes, but they crossed it first. They killed 10 million civilians. 10 million. So we'll build weapons that make sure it never happens again. The first prototype was a ship-mounted railgun that could punch through 3 feet of solid armor. The second was a missile that could track targets through FTL. The third was something nobody talked about except in whispers. A weapon so terrible that even Taeyong hesitated before approving it, but he approved it anyway. Because Mercy had gotten 10 million people killed, all across Earth, people lined up to enlist. The military had to turn people away because there were too many volunteers. One of those volunteers was Hana Yoon. She was 24 years old. Before Terra Nova, she had been a teacher. Now she wanted to be a soldier. Why do you want to join? The recruitment officer asked her. My sister lived on Terra Nova, Hannah replied. Her voice was flat, emotionless. She was 7 years old. She liked drawing pictures of flowers. Now she's dead. So I want to kill the things that killed her. The officer looked at her for a long moment. Then he stamped her papers. Welcome to the Retaliation Corps. The Retaliation Corps was something new. Elite soldiers trained in one simple doctrine, overwhelming, relentless, total warfare. They didn't learn about peacekeeping or crowd control. They learned how to breach ship hulls in zero gravity. They learned how to clear buildings full of enemies. They learned how to win, no matter the cost. Hannah threw herself into training. She ran until her legs gave out. She practiced shooting until her hands bled. At night, she lay in her bunk and remembered her sister's laugh. Then she got up and trained some more. In space, Admiral Hyun Kim watched the fleet take shape. The ships weren't beautiful like alien vessels. They weren't sleek or elegant. They were brutal slabs of armor and weapons, covered in redundant systems and backup generators. They were designed to survive and keep fighting even when everything went wrong. The flagship was called Righteous Fury. It was 3 kilometers long and bristled with enough weapons to destroy a small moon. Hyun stood on its bridge and felt grim satisfaction. This ship would carry humanity's message to the Vralik. A message written in fire and steel. 2 years passed. 2 years of building and training and preparing. The galaxy noticed that Earth had gone quiet. Human merchant ships recalled from alien ports. Human diplomats left their posts. Humanity withdrew behind its borders and said nothing to anyone. The Galactic Council sent investigators to find out what Earth was doing. The investigators found locked borders and weapons platforms. They found humans who smiled politely and said nothing. They returned to the Council with warnings that humanity was militarizing on a massive scale. The Council sent Earth a formal complaint. Aggressive militarization violated Council protocols. Earth needed to explain itself immediately. President Daeho Lee read the complaint and laughed. It was not a happy laugh. He sent back a single sentence: "We are done explaining ourselves to you." In Vralik space, intercepted communications showed the aliens laughing about Earth's preparations. A single species building a fleet? One Vralik commander said. They should be begging us for peace. Instead, they play at war. Let them come. We will crush them like we crushed their colony. The Vralik military held war games showing how they would defeat any human attack. Their strategists were confident. They had 4,000 worlds. Humanity had maybe a dozen. They had ships numbering in the hundreds of thousands. Humanity had maybe a few thousand at most. The math was simple. The Vralik would win, but the Vralik didn't understand what they were facing. They thought of war as something calculated and rational. They thought armies fought for territory or resources or political advantage. They didn't understand that humans were fighting for something else entirely. On the day the fleet launched, every human on Earth and in the colonies stopped what they were doing. They watched the broadcast as 1,200 warships gathered near Mars. It was the largest fleet humanity had ever built. It carried more firepower than all of human history combined. Admiral Hyan Kim stood on the bridge of righteous fury and looked at his crew. They were young. So many of them were young. But their eyes were old. They had all seen the images from Terra Nova. They all knew what they were going for. 2 years ago, Hyan said over the fleet-wide channel, the Vralik murdered our families, our friends, our children. They thought we would forget. They thought we would forgive. Today we teach them the truth. We teach them that humanity never forgets, that humanity never forgives, and that humanity always collects its debts. The fleet jumped to FTL. 1,200 ships vanished in flashes of light, headed toward Vralik space. Toward revenge. Toward justice. Toward whatever word you used when mercy was no longer an option. Back on Earth, people gathered in homes and public spaces. They held pictures of loved ones who died on Terra Nova. They lit candles. They prayed, those who still believed in prayer. And they waited to hear what would happen when humanity's fury finally reached its target. The forging was complete. The weapon was ready. Now came the time to use it. The Vengeance fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of Vralik space. 1,200 human warships appeared all at once, their weapons already hot, their shields already up. On the bridge of righteous fury, Admiral Hyan Kim opened a channel to all frequencies. Every Vralik listening post would hear this. Every alien ship in the sector would receive it. This is Admiral Hyan Kim of the Terran Defense Fleet, he said. His voice was calm and cold. 2 years ago, you murdered 10 million humans on Terra Nova. You killed our families. Our children. You showed no mercy and you expected no consequences. You were wrong. Today we begin your education. He closed the channel and turned to his weapons officer. Target the mining colony on Kelter 4. Send the evacuation warning. On Kelter 4, a Vralik mining world of 3 million inhabitants, alarms suddenly screamed across every city. The local garrison commander stared at his screens in confusion. Human ships? Here? Impossible. Humans didn't have the strength to attack Vralik space. This had to be some kind of mistake. Then the message came through, broadcast in every language the Vralik knew. This is the Terran Defense Fleet. You have 6 hours to evacuate all civilians from this planet. After 6 hours, we will destroy all military and industrial targets. We will not harm civilians who evacuate. But we will show your military the same mercy you showed Terra Nova. You have 6 hours. The garrison commander immediately called for reinforcements. The Vralik defense fleet in this sector numbered 800 ships. They moved toward Kelterfor at maximum speed. The commander watched them approach on his screens and felt relief. 800 ships against 1,200. The odds were bad, but Vralik warriors were the best in the galaxy. They would win. Down in the cities, panic erupted. Vralik civilians had heard stories about Terra Nova. They knew what humans found there. Now those same humans were here, armed and angry. Families ran to spaceports. They pushed and shoved to get onto transport ships. Some didn't make it in time. Captain Minho Choi watched the evacuation from his position on the destroyer Unforgiven. He commanded this ship now, promoted after surviving Terra Nova. Most days he wished he hadn't survived. He still saw the faces of his men in his dreams. Still heard their screams. "Captain, the Vralik defense fleet is approaching," his tactical officer reported. 800 ships. They'll be in weapons range in 20 minutes. "Good," Minho said. "Let them come." Around him, his crew worked with quiet efficiency. These were humans who had lost everything. Some lost family on Terra Nova, others lost friends. All of them lost innocence. They knew what they were here to do, and they wouldn't hesitate. The Vralik fleet arrived exactly 20 minutes later. They formed a battle line and charged forward, weapons firing. Blue energy beams and kinetic missiles filled the space between the two fleets. The first human ships were hit. Their shields flared and died. Armor plating melted. Ships broke apart, but the humans kept coming. Vralik captain watched in horror as a human destroyer lost half its hull to weapons fire. The ship should have been dead. Instead, it kept flying forward on emergency thrusters. It crashed directly into a Vralik battleship, and both vessels exploded in a ball of nuclear fire. "They're insane," the Vralik captain whispered. "They're fighting like madmen." More human ships pressed the attack. They absorbed damage that would have crippled any other species and kept fighting. Their weapons fired constantly, never stopping even when systems were failing. When ships couldn't fight anymore, their crews aimed them at Vralik vessels and rammed them. Captain Minho Choi's ship took a direct hit to the port side. Half his crew died instantly. The ship spun out of control. Emergency lights flashed red everywhere. Minho grabbed his console and pulled himself upright. "Can we fight?" He shouted over the alarms. "We have 1 railgun left," his weapons officer replied. Blood ran down her face from a cut on her forehead. "Everything else is offline." "Then we use the 1 railgun," Minho said. "Fire at will." The Unforgiven fired its last weapon again and again until the barrel overheated and exploded. By then, 3 Vralik ships were destroyed. Minho ordered his crew to abandon ship. They evacuated in pods while the Unforgiven drifted away, a burning wreck. But Minho's sacrifice mattered. Every human sacrifice mattered. Because while the Vralik fleet was focused on the main battle, human strike craft had slipped past their lines. These small, fast ships carried special weapons. Weapons designed by Chief Engineer Taeyong Seo specifically to break Vralik defenses. Lieutenant Hannah Yoon piloted one of those strike craft. She dove through the chaos of the battle, dodging weapons fire and debris. Her target was a Vralik carrier, massive and heavily armored. On Terra Nova, ships like this had launched the hunter drones that killed civilians in shelters. Ships like this had killed her little sister. Hannah armed her missile and fired. The missile was small but contained a shaped nuclear charge. It hit the carrier's hangar bay and detonated. The explosion tore through the ship's interior, setting off fuel stores and ammunition. The carrier broke in half and died. "For Terra Nova," Hannah whispered. Then she turned her craft toward the next target. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it ended, 600 Vralik ships were destroyed. 300 fled back to their bases. The human fleet lost 400 ships. By any military calculation, it was a costly victory. But Admiral Hyen Kim hadn't come here for easy victories. He came to send a message. With the Vralik defense fleet broken, The human ships moved into orbit around Kelter 4. The 6-hour evacuation period had ended. The cities were mostly empty. Civilian transports had carried away millions of Vralik families. But the military bases remained. The weapon factories remained. The infrastructure that supported Vralik expansion remained. All ships, Admiral Hyan said. Begin bombardment. Human weapons fell from the sky like rain. Missiles and railgun rounds and energy beams struck every military target on the planet. Bases exploded. Factories burned. Orbital platforms shattered. For 3 hours, fire and destruction covered Kelter 4. When it was over, the planet's military power was gone. But the cities stood intact. The hospitals and schools and homes were untouched. Just like Admiral Hyan promised, no civilians were harmed. The evacuation had worked. The humans kept their word, but before the fleet left, Admiral Hyan ordered one more thing. Human engineers built a massive holographic monument in orbit. It projected the names of every person who died on Terra Nova, all 10 million names, glowing against the darkness of space. And at the bottom, a message in Vralik language: "We remember." Always, news of the battle spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. Council Chancellor Morvik stood before the assembly, his insectoid face showing distress. "The humans have attacked a Vralik colony," he announced. "This is a clear violation of Council law. We must demand an immediate ceasefire." But before anyone could vote, Ambassador Yeho Ru appeared on the Council chamber screens. He was humanity's new ambassador, chosen specifically because he had no patience for diplomatic nonsense. "The Council wishes to speak about violations," Yeho said. His voice carried acid. "Where was the Council when Terra Nova burned? Where were your emergency sessions then? Where was your outrage when 10 million humans died?" He paused. "I'll tell you where it was. Nowhere. You did nothing because we were weak and alone. Well, we're not weak anymore. And your words mean nothing to us? Stay out of our way, or learn what happens to those who stand between humans and justice." The transmission ended. The council chamber erupted in angry voices. Some demanded sanctions against Earth, others called for military intervention. But cooler heads pointed out the obvious problem. Humanity just destroyed 800 Vralik ships. Humanity had weapons and technology nobody had seen before. And humanity clearly didn't care what the Council thought. In Vralik space, Fleet Master Virak received reports of the Kelter 4 disaster with growing anger. 800 ships destroyed? One colony in ruins? This was unacceptable. The humans were insects. Weak little creatures playing at war. They needed to be taught a lesson. Virak assembled his second armada. 3,000 ships, the pride of Vralik military power. He would chase down these human raiders and destroy them. He would make an example of Earth. By the time he was done, humanity would beg for mercy. "Prepare to launch," Virak ordered. "We hunt humans now. And when we find them, we show them why the Vralik rule this galaxy." His fleet jumped to FTL, pursuing the human vessels. Virak smiled as his ships raced through space. The humans had won one battle. Let them enjoy it. It would be their last victory, but what Virak didn't know was that the humans weren't running. They were leading him exactly where they wanted him to go. To a place called Proxima Threshold. To an ambush 2 years in the making, Admiral Hyan Kim watched his fleet approach the asteroid field and allowed himself a cold smile. "Come on, Virak," he muttered. "Follow us. We have something special waiting for you." The Proxima Threshold was a dense asteroid field on the edge of Vralik territory. Thousands of rocks, some as small as cars and others as large as cities, tumbled through space in chaotic patterns. It was a dangerous place to fly, let alone fight. Perfect for an ambush, Fleet Master Virok's armada of 3,000 ships pursued the humans into the field. His tactical officers warned him it was too convenient, too obvious. The humans were leading them into a trap. But Virak refused to believe it. Humans were primitive. They didn't think strategically. They were just running scared. "Continue pursuit," Virak ordered. "We have them now. The human fleet fled deeper into the asteroid field, their ships weaving between the massive rocks. Varrock's ships followed. His crews were confident. 3,000 ships against maybe 800 humans. Even if it was a trap, the Vralik had overwhelming numbers. They would win through sheer force. Admiral Hyun Kim watched the Vralik fleet enter the kill zone and felt no satisfaction. Only cold determination. 2 years ago, his people spent months seeding this asteroid field with weapons. Mines disguised as rocks. Automated railgun platforms hidden in asteroid caves. Missile batteries camouflaged with sensor-absorbing paint. The Vralik were flying into a meat grinder, and they didn't even know it. All stations, Hyun said quietly. Activate defensive systems. On my mark. He watched the tactical display as more and more Vralik ships entered the field. Mark! Hell erupted in the asteroid field. Thousands of mines detonated simultaneously. They had been scattered throughout the field, waiting for this moment. The explosions tore through Vralik ships like paper. Vessels that had been flying in formation suddenly found themselves in expanding clouds of shrapnel and fire before the Vralik could react. The automated weapons platforms opened fire. Railguns hidden in asteroid caves fired tungsten rods at near-light speed. The rods punched through Vralik armor like it wasn't there. Ships broke apart, their hulls shredded by impacts they never saw coming. Evasive maneuvers! Varrock screamed, but there was nowhere to evade to. The asteroid field limited movement. His ships couldn't form defensive formations. They were scattered and vulnerable. Then the human fleet reversed course. Instead of running, they turned and charged straight at the Vralik armada. Lieutenant Hannah Yoon's strike fighter squadron dove into the chaos. Her display showed target after target. She picked a Vralik destroyer and locked missiles. Fox 3, she said calmly, firing. The missiles streaked forward and impacted the destroyer's engines. The ship spun out of control and crashed into an asteroid, exploding on impact. Around her, the other human pilots worked with mechanical efficiency. They had trained for this, practiced it hundreds of times in simulation. Now they executed perfectly, hitting weak points and critical systems. The Vralik ships were larger and more heavily armed, but the humans were faster and knew exactly where to strike, on the flagship of the human fleet. Captain Minho Choi had survived the battle at Kelterfor and received a new command. The destroyer Unforgiven had been destroyed, but humanity had given him another ship. This one was called Never Forget. It was a fitting name. All batteries, fire at will, Minho ordered. His ship's weapon systems came alive, throwing missiles and energy beams at the Vralik formation. A Vralik battleship tried to return fire, but human strike fighters had already crippled its targeting systems. The battleship's weapons shot wide, hitting nothing but empty space. Minho's ship closed to knife-fighting range with a Vralik cruiser. Both vessels hammered each other with point-blank fire. The cruiser was bigger and more powerful, but Never Forget had been built to take punishment. Its armor held. Its systems kept functioning even when they should have failed. And when the cruiser finally broke apart under sustained fire, Never Forget was still fighting. Fleetmaster Varrock watched his perfect armada disintegrate. Ships exploded by the dozens. His formation was gone. His tactical advantage of numbers meant nothing in this chaos. Everywhere he looked, human ships were tearing through Vralik vessels with terrifying efficiency. "We need to retreat," his second-in-command said. "No," Varrock snapped. "We still have superior numbers. We can win this." But even as he said it, he knew it was a lie. The humans weren't fighting like any species he had encountered before. When Vralik ships suffered heavy damage, they retreated to repair. When human ships suffered heavy damage, they rammed the nearest Vralik vessel and exploded. It was insane. It was wasteful. It was devastatingly effective. A human destroyer lost all power and drifted toward Varrock's flagship. He ordered his weapons crew to destroy it. They fired, but the destroyer's crew had already armed the ship's reactor for overload. The destroyer exploded just as it collided with the flagship's shields. The combined force of impact and detonation overloaded the shields. They failed. Suddenly Varrock's flagship was vulnerable. Human fighters swarmed it like angry insects. They targeted the sensor arrays, the communication systems, the weapons batteries. Within minutes, the flagship was blind and defenseless. "Abandon ship," Varrock ordered. He had lost. He knew it now. The humans had lured him into a trap and crushed his armada like insects. 3,000 ships reduced to burning wrecks and fleeing survivors. Before his escape pod launched, Varrock sent one final message to Vralik Command. "Recall all fleets. Prepare defenses. The humans are not what we thought. They don't fight for territory or resources. They fight like demons. They don't stop. They don't surrender. They just keep coming until everything is dead." He paused, looking at his destroyed fleet on the screens. "May the gods help us all." The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, 2,000 Vralik ships were destroyed. Another 800 fled in disarray. The human fleet lost 300 ships, but they had won. Decisively, overwhelmingly. Admiral Haeun Kim surveyed the wreckage and felt nothing. No joy, no satisfaction. Just the grim knowledge that this was only the beginning. "Set course for the next target," he ordered. "We're not done teaching this lesson." The human fleet moved through Vralik space like an avenging angel. Over the next 3 months, they struck 6 more colonies. Each time, they broadcast the same warning: 6 hours to evacuate civilians. Then military targets would be destroyed. And each time, they kept their word. Civilians who evacuated were safe. Military forces were annihilated. The Galactic Council watched in growing horror. Species from across the galaxy saw the battle recordings. They saw human ships that refused to die. They saw human soldiers who fought with a fury that seemed inhuman. Council Chancellor Morvik called another emergency session. "We must stop the humans," he declared. "This level of aggression threatens the entire galactic order." But Ambassador Yeho Ru appeared on their screens again. "You wanted to talk about threats to the galactic order? The Vralik murdered 10 million civilians, and you find them. Now we're destroying military targets and evacuating civilians, and suddenly we're the problem." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Here's our message to the Council. Stay out of our way. This is between humanity and the Vralik. Anyone who interferes becomes our enemy too. Choose wisely." Across the galaxy, species began giving human space a wide berth. Merchant ships changed their routes to avoid human patrols. Diplomatic missions closed. Nobody wanted to provoke Earth. Nobody wanted to learn what it felt like to face human fury. In Vralik space, panic spread. Fleetmaster Varrock's warning had been broadcast to every military installation. The humans were coming. The humans couldn't be stopped. The humans had weapons and tactics nobody had seen before. Vralik commanders called for reinforcements. They built new defensive positions. They prepared for the worst, but nothing prepared them for what came next. Because the human fleet wasn't stopping at colonies anymore, they were heading straight for the Vralik homeworld. For Vralik's Prime, for the heart of the Vralik Collective on Vralik's Prime, a planet of 12 billion souls, the government convened an emergency session. The military leaders reported the same thing over and over. The humans were unstoppable. Every fleet sent against them had been destroyed. Every defensive position had been overrun. Nothing worked. "We must surrender," one counselor said. "Offer them anything? Money, territory, resources? Whatever they want." "What they want," another counselor replied grimly, "is revenge? And I don't think we can pay enough for 10 million dead." The Vralik government sent a message to Earth: unconditional surrender. They would disarm completely. They would pay reparations. They would execute every military commander involved in Terra Nova. They would do anything humanity demanded. "Just please, stop the attack." The message reached Admiral Haeun Kim's fleet as it approached Vralik's Prime. He read it carefully. Then he forwarded it to Earth and waited for orders. This decision was too big for him alone. This decision belonged to humanity as a whole. The human fleet hung in space above Vralik's Prime like an executioner's blade. 700 warships surrounded the planet, their weapons trained on military targets below. In orbit, Vralic defense platforms sat silent and dark. The Vralic had powered them down as a sign of surrender. They were defenseless now. Completely at humanity's mercy on the bridge of righteous fury, Admiral Hyun Kim waited for Earth's response to the Vralic surrender offer. Around him, his senior officers gathered. They all knew what hung in the balance. One word from Earth and 12 billion Vralic would die. The planet could be glassed in hours, just like Terra Nova. Captain Minho Choi stood at the tactical station. His hands rested on the weapons controls. He thought about his men, the soldiers who died on Terra Nova. He thought about the crater where 50,000 people once lived. Part of him wanted to press the fire button and finish this. End the Vralic forever. Lieutenant Hana Yoon was there too, having been called up from her fighter squadron for this meeting. She held a photograph of her sister, 7 years old, with a bright smile and flowers in her hair. Gone now, turned to ash and memory. Hana's hand trembled slightly as she looked at the planet below. Chief Engineer Taeyong Seo joined them via video link from Earth. He looked tired. The past 2 years had aged him. Building weapons of mass destruction did that to a person. Whatever you decide, he said quietly, the weapons will work. I made sure of that. If you want to destroy that planet, we can. Admiral Hyun Kim nodded slowly. I know, that's what frightens me. He pulled up the surrender message again. Unconditional surrender. Complete disarmament. War crime trials, reparations, everything humanity could possibly demand. They're offering us everything. They're offering us nothing, Minho said harshly. They can't give back the dead. They can't undo Terra Nova, so what good are their promises? He's right, Hannah added. Her voice was hard. My sister is still dead. All of them are still dead. Surrender doesn't change that. Engineer Taeyong spoke from Earth, so we kill 12 billion in return. Make 12 billion more dead children? Where does it end? The bridge fell silent. It was the question nobody wanted to ask. The question that had haunted humanity for 2 years. How much revenge was enough? How many Vralic had to die before the scales balanced? President Daeho Lee's transmission arrived before anyone could answer. His face appeared on the screen, and every officer snapped to attention. The president looked older, too. The weight of leading humanity through this crisis showed in every line of his face. Admiral Kim, Daeho said, I've consulted with every government on Earth. I've read the Vralic surrender offer. And I've made a decision. He paused, and in that pause, the fate of billions hung suspended. I'm coming to you. I'll deliver Earth's answer in person. Hold position until I arrive. The transmission ended. Hyun Kim frowned. The president was coming here? To the fleet? That was unprecedented. But he had his orders. All ships, he commanded. Maintain position. No hostile action. We wait. President Daeho Lee arrived 2 days later aboard a fast diplomatic ship. He came to righteous fury and asked Admiral Hyun to assemble his senior officers. When they gathered in the conference room, Daeho looked at each of them carefully. I need to understand something, the president said. Not as your commander, but as a fellow human. What do you want? What would satisfy the debt the Vralic owe us? Minho spoke first. I want them to feel what we felt. I want them to know terror and loss. I want them to hurt the way we hurt. Hannah nodded agreement. They took everything from us. We should take everything from them. But then Engineer Taeyong shook his head. No, if we glass that planet, we become what they are. We become murderers of civilians. Is that what Terra Nova died for? So we could prove we're just as bad? They started this, Minho shot back. They chose to kill civilians. We're just finishing it, are we? Admiral Hyun asked quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. Are we finishing it? Or are we just continuing the cycle? Today we kill 12 billion Vralic. Tomorrow, some Vralic survivor builds a fleet and kills 12 billion humans. Then we kill more of them. They kill more of us. Where does it end? President Daeho stood and walked to the window. He stared down at Vralix Prime, at the planet full of people who were waiting to learn if they would live or die. 2 years ago, he said softly, the Vralik taught us that mercy is weakness. They showed us that civilization means nothing when someone decides to kill. They proved that the galaxy is cruel and cold and doesn't care about justice. He turned back to face them. And they were wrong. They were wrong because we're about to prove them wrong. We're about to show the galaxy what real strength looks like. What real civilization means. We're going to give the Vralik something they never gave us. He paused. Mercy. Minho stood up angrily. Sir, you can't be serious. After everything they did, Deho interrupted, we're going to be better than them. Not because they deserve it. They don't. But because we deserve it. Because the people who died on Terra Nova deserve to be remembered as victims of monsters, not as an excuse for us to become monsters ourselves. So they get away with it? Hannah's voice cracked with emotion. My sister dies and they just get away with it? No, Deho said firmly. They don't get away with anything. We're going to occupy their planet. We're going to dismantle their military. Every ship, every weapon, every defense platform will be destroyed. We're going to try their war criminals and execute the guilty. We're going to make them pay. But we're not going to murder civilians. That's not who we are. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Admiral Hein Kim spoke. With respect, sir, I'm not sure the fleet will accept this. They've been fighting for revenge. They've lost friends and ships. Asking them to show mercy now. I know, Deho said. That's why I came here. To explain this in person. To look every one of you in the eye and tell you why this matters. He looked at each officer. The Vralik took something from us. They took our innocence. Our belief that the universe was fair. Our trust in civilization. If we glass that planet, we lose something else. We lose ourselves. We lose the moral authority to call ourselves better than them. But it feels wrong, Hannah whispered. It feels like betraying the dead. I know, Deho said gently. Believe me, I know. I've stared at pictures of those 10 million people every day for 2 years. Every face. Every name. I know them all. His voice grew stronger. But you know what? I think they'd want us to be better. I think they'd want humanity to remain human. Not because the Vralik deserve mercy, but because we deserve to stay who we are. Slowly, reluctantly, the officers began to nod. It wasn't satisfaction. It wasn't happiness. But it was acceptance. They would follow this order. They would show mercy even though everything in them screamed for revenge. President Deho Lee broadcast to the entire fleet. He explained the decision. He told them about mercy and civilization and the importance of remaining human. Some ships' crews cheered. Others were silent. A few showed anger. But none refused the order. Then Deho broadcast to Vralix Prime. His message reached every Vralik on the planet. 2 years ago, you taught us that mercy is weakness. Today, we teach you differently. We will not kill your civilians. We will not glass your cities. We will not do to you what you did to us. He paused. But your military will be dismantled. Your weapons will be seized. Your war criminals will be tried. And you will live forever with the knowledge that humanity chose mercy when you did not. You will live knowing that we were better than you. The human fleet descended to Vralix Prime. Marines landed at military bases and government buildings. The Vralik offered no resistance. They surrendered completely. Over the following months, every warship was destroyed. Every weapons factory was demolished. Every orbital platform was dismantled. War crime trials began. The military commanders who ordered the attack on Terra Nova were judged by a tribunal that included humans, Vralik civilians, and neutral alien observers. The evidence was overwhelming. The commanders were found guilty and executed. Not in revenge, but in justice, the occupation continued for 5 years. During that time, humanity rebuilt Vralik Prime's civilian infrastructure. They repaired hospitals damaged in the initial bombardment. They helped restart factories that made food and medicine instead of weapons. It wasn't forgiveness. It was proof that humans could be both strong and merciful. Ambassador Yehoru addressed the Galactic Council one final time. The chamber was packed with representatives from every major species. They watched him with a mixture of fear and respect. 2 years ago, Yeho said, you told us to forgive. You told us to move forward. You told us to be civilized. He smiled coldly. We have shown you mercy. We could have destroyed Ralix Prime. We had the power. We had the justification. But we chose not to. We chose to be better than our enemies. He let that sink in. But understand this. Humanity remembers. We will always remember. The names of 10 million dead are carved into our collective soul. And should anyone, anywhere, raise their hand against innocent human lives again, he paused, we will return. And next time there will be no warnings, no evacuations, no mercy. This is the message written in flame across Ralix space. Read it well.